Hello, I'm Rod Dreher, and we're here today with Metropolitan Hilarion to talk about the Gospels. Vladika, it's been a long time since you and I sat here to talk about the Bible, the Scriptures. So much has happened in the news. Even things that happened 1 month ago seem stale now. Yet the Gospels, the good news, seems always fresh. Why?
First of all, because it's good news, and people are looking for good news. People have too many bad news around them, and people are looking for the good news. Secondly, it is fresh because it is a deeply touching human story. And regardless of your religion, regardless of whether you believe in God or not, it is a deeply touching story, and it touches the hearts of many people. And of course, for those who believe in God, the Gospels are always fresh because they always tell us something about Jesus Christ, about his personality, about his teaching, and whenever we read them and reread them, we discover something new.
Now, of course, the Gospels are inspired by God, but they're written by men. Can you tell us about the calling of the first disciples and why there are differences between the account in the Gospel of John and the account in the other Gospels?
In the other Gospels, which we call the Synoptic Gospels, and especially in Mark and Matthew, we very often find similar stories. And there are different theories. We mentioned some of them in our conversations about the interrelation between these two Gospels and generally about the three Synoptic Gospels. If we read the story of calling of the disciples as it is presented in Mark and Matthew, we get the impression that Jesus calls people whom he sees for the first time and who see him for the first time. He walks along the Sea of Galilee, he sees fishermen, Peter and Andrew, and he calls them. Then he sees another two brothers, John and Jacob, and he calls them, and they leave everything and they follow him. So the impression that we get is that these people see him for the first time, they leave everything and they follow him. If we compare this account with the account of John, then things look quite differently, because the first disciples of Jesus were in fact previously the disciples of John the Baptist. One of them was Andrew, who was the brother of Peter, and another one is unnamed, and most probably it was John the Evangelist himself, because he often presents himself as an unnamed disciple, or as the disciple who was loved by Jesus. So these two, from among the disciples of John the Baptist, followed Jesus. Then Andrew called Peter, then Andrew brought Peter to Jesus, they met. And then there was another encounter which was described in John, and it was Philip whom Jesus finds somewhere, and it was his brother Nathanael who comes to see Jesus. So we see that at least some of these disciples, which are mentioned in the Synoptic Gospels, they are already known to Jesus, and they already know Jesus before he finds them on the shores of the Sea of Galilee.
Is this important for any particular reason?
This is important because we have, in fact, very little information about the disciples at all. And whatever scarce information we have is precious, especially because it helps us understand why they followed him and how they followed him, and that perhaps it was not that they were caught by surprise when he called them, but they were already somewhat prepared.
Now, you keep using the word to follow, the verb to follow. to refer to what the disciples did to Jesus. Talk about what that means. What does it mean when Christ said, "Follow me"? And what should we today, as disciples of Christ, how should we understand that?
They certainly didn't know what expects them. And he didn't make any promises. He didn't say you will have bright future, you will have nice life, you will have success in your ministry. On the contrary, as we see from his teachings to the disciples, he was constantly warning them. He would say to them that you will not be welcomed by many people, you will be chastised, you will be punished, some of you will die. He doesn't promise them anything good in worldly terms. But he tells them that they should follow them, and he tells some of them that instead of fishermen, they will be the fishers of men, which basically means that they will work not with fish, but with human beings. And he gives them those special powers that he had, including the miraculous power.
You know, there must have been something immense about Jesus's authority to be able to speak these words to the men and they would obey. You know, they didn't stop, as you said, to figure what's in it for me, but they just stopped everything and followed him. We see in Dante, in the Divine Comedy, at the very beginning there, you see the pilgrim Dante is stuck in the dark wood. Virgil comes out, the poet Virgil comes out of the wood and says, "Follow me if you want to live." He's been sent by God. And we see there, I think, a parallel to Christ calling the disciples, because he tells them, you know, here's the way to live. And that authority is something so many people today have trouble with.
And this is also the response to your question about what it means to follow Jesus today. It doesn't simply mean to follow his teaching. It means to follow him personally, to go after him, to love him, to encounter him in your personal experience, to trust him, and to follow him.
You know, Kierkegaard, the philosopher, said that there's a difference between a disciple and an admirer. Lots of people admire Jesus, but not all of his admirers will follow him. Kierkegaard said you can tell the difference when suffering comes. The admirers fall away when it's time to suffer, but the disciples will share Jesus' suffering.
Well, this is exactly what happened, but not only to the admirers, it also happened to the disciples. When Jesus was suffering, they all, or almost all, disappeared. Only a few faithful women stood by the cross of Jesus. But the discipleship is something which you take for the entire duration of your life. It's not a certain temporary period. If you want to be a disciple of Jesus, you choose this path and you follow it wherever it leads you, wherever he leads you. And you may have many surprises on this way, many pleasant and unpleasant surprises. You may have many discoveries, but you may also have some disappointments. Perhaps not in him, not in his personality, not in his teaching, but in yourself. You may quickly discover, or you may at some point discover, that you are incapable to be always up to the high standard which he sets before you.
You know, when I was doing my research on the Christians behind the Iron Curtain in the communist countries who suffered in prison for their faith, one thing I learned from them, from their testimonies, is they assumed that suffering was part of the Christian life. None of them had the illusion that if I become a Christian, I'm going to get rich and healthy and have a great life. They wanted that. Some of them may have had that before, but they just assumed that sharing in Christ's suffering was part of the deal. It seems that we have lost that in our very comfortable, wealthy, modern life today.
In the Soviet time, in the Soviet Union, it was certainly part of the deal, and whoever wanted to follow Christ, whoever wanted to be a believer, realized that he will go against the current, that he will have to suffer in one way or another, and some even became martyrs and confessors. We have a huge list of people who have been canonized as martyrs and confessors. But there are much longer lists of those who were not canonized and will probably never be canonized, and yet they were martyrs and confessors.
Okay. Metropolitan Hilarion, thank you very much. I'm Rod Dreher.